Hey everybody, I'm Michael Raparez, and I reviewed Dying Light for IGN. We're going to talk about it in this review panel. With me are John Ryan.
Hi there.
And Brian Altano.
Hi.
So let's talk about what I said about the game first. Beginning as a furtive, desperate survival horror experience, Dying Light gradually and gratifyingly evolves into a fast, hyper-violent celebration of vertical freedom and zombie destruction. Its main story is unspectacular, but the memorable side quests and sheer fun of exploring its world do a fantastic job of offsetting that, making Dying Light one of the most engrossing open-world games, zombie-infested or otherwise, I've played in a while. I want to start off by talking about the action in this game, the combat and parkour. I really enjoyed both of it. I thought it was a little trying at first, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, going into it, I was a little bit apprehensive. Because people were like, "Oh, it's like Dead Island meets Mirror's Edge," and I was like, "I don't know if I want to play that game." But then, as soon as I'd spent a little bit of time with it, I thought it worked really well, way better than I expected. It was fluid, it worked, and it was fun.
I felt sort of the same way, where I was also apprehensive, but once I played the first few hours, I actually hated it.
Really?
And then totally started coming around after a little while. I felt like the first area, personally, I think the first hour of the game is a very bad representation of how the game eventually does become, you know?
Like how it opens up.
Yeah. And I felt that like walking around that building and just sort of interacting with people was very slow. But once you get to that roof and you get to that first part where you're actually going through that test run, I found it very jarring and very sort of like disorienting. And I would find myself like, I think I fell off of that thing like 4 times. You're probably watching this video going, you suck at games or something. But I could see a lot of people are probably running in there, and yeah, they totally are. But a lot of people are probably jumping in there and trying to figure out how to do the running jumps and then holding on to the trigger to jump and grab onto something. Walking along, shimmying along ledges and then like looking to the left, it felt like your neck stopped here.
Also, I just always forget that I can shimmy in general. Like I'll always be like, shimmy, and okay, I'm just gonna drop and try again. Like, going straight up. I only think in straight lines, and it reminds me sometimes that I have to not do that.
I think the more I started playing it, like I think I went in kind of expecting like Mirror's Edge meets Zombie U, right? And what I got was more a game that felt like, you know, Zombie U meets Assassin's Creed, where the way I was climbing and traversing things, it was a little less than just like jump on that orange blinking thing and move along.
Right.
But after a while, I started getting it, and you start actually getting to the rhythm of running down a street and climbing up something and jumping over it and keeping that momentum going. And I think if you don't play like that and you sort of like trudge around like it's a Call of Duty game, like
it's super weird.
You're not gonna get it. Like it's not really about being on the ground. So it took some time, and I feel like they didn't introduce it in the best way possible. But I was happy with it.
They definitely kind of leave you to your own devices after the first like 15, 20 minutes. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like they also don't really do the best job of like telling you what all your options are. But other than that, I thought like after the first hour or so, I think you're absolutely right. Once it opens up, like you can really start running and getting into it. You'll never want to spend time on the ground again.
I really do feel like that's like, you know, years and years later now, the first-person games, they still sort of struggle with that platforming perspective problem that some games like Metroid Prime kind of got right, and there was a way to like jump in that game and land on something and felt like it clicked. And this game, it took a little bit of time to get there, and I don't know if we'll ever get there in that perspective. But I think that stuff like this is a good stride forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you guys adjust? Like, I kind of thought that using the triggers to jump was really awkward at first. It took me hours before I could say I was used to it.
I mean, I'm used to it, but I still screw it up every time. You know. I thought it was an interesting choice. Like I can kind of see why they did it, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, you really only use the X button or the A button for like 1 or 2 things, and it's very sporadic when you actually do. So like, why not just map that to jump? Like, I mean, at least it's customizable on PC.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad you said that, because I felt like a crazy person when I was like, this doesn't. Why would you put that there? But yeah, after a while, I started associating with like not only jumping but grabbing onto things and sort of being like, there's a hold mechanism that's going with what my fingers are doing to the controller.
Yeah, I think it's less about your hands on the controller and your actual hands in the game. Because it's all mapped to like, all right, I'm gonna pull out this weapon and then I'm gonna throw it, or I'm gonna like jump over here and then hit this thing. It's your hands versus like just what buttons feel right.
Yeah, totally.
What do you guys think about how the combat evolves over over the course of the game. Especially like at the beginning, I thought it was a huge struggle. Like just wading into hordes of zombies, your stamina runs out really fast.
Oh yeah.
And one thing that kept bugging me that I forgot to mention in the review was that the screen kind of clouds and goes dark as you run out of stamina, which to me says, I'm dying.
Yeah.
I'm being chewed to pieces here, but that's not it at all. So that.
But in a way, I mean, you are dying. Like, I mean, if you run out of stamina, you're toast.
If you get caught while you're out of stamina,
So, and I thought that was cool. I thought, as you level up and as you get more stamina and as you get more powerful attacks, it was really satisfying. And like, I liked the fact that at the beginning of the game, like, I just had no other option but to run.
Yeah.
Because like, you get a rusty pipe and
that's
a
it.
table leg. And you're like, I've got nothing. I can't do that. And I thought it was.
And they're both toast within minutes.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And you're just looking around. You're like, I think that's a table leg. I don't know because this whole world's like weird and dirty.
Yeah, here's like a plank with a nail in it, but it's good for like 2 hits.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really cool. It made it a very frantic experience.
And I need to
really
find
enjoyed
some
it.
metal pieces to repair this baseball bat.
Yeah.
Which apparently involves wrapping tape around it.
Yeah, sure, whatever it takes. I found the same thing where the sort of like pulsing red around the outside. It was like it actually like actively annoyed me. And then I started thinking like, yeah, but dude, you played like Legend of Zelda on the NES, and we had half a heart in that game. It started beeping incessantly. And it's the same thing like we had mentioned Call of Duty before. Like Call of Duty gets that. It looks like
vision.
it looks like when the screen gets jammed in Spaceballs, where there's just blood all over it. And it's just like something that I don't know if that'll ever go away as like a mechanism and sort of.
No, I think that's kind of a trope
storytelling.
that we're stuck with for a while.
But yeah, once I got used to it, I was like, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I also really like to see how when you do have to repair your weapons, even though I think it happened way too often. I like that the models were the weapons were modeled differently every time. Like if you break your crowbar, you get a repair, and then it's got like some extra pieces of metal like scrapped to the side of it, and then it's got like the whole thing is like wrapped in rebar. I thought it was a really cool little touch, and it made me happy to see.
Yeah, I appreciate touches of realism in a game about zombies.
Exactly.
Like it's kind of cool. They're sort of like, look, this is this insane world. It's not real. This could never happen. Hopefully, but but if it did, every time you tape something up, it would look a little different.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It's
cool.
not just
I
like
that.
I gotta fix my crowbar. Oh look, a perfectly new crowbar. It's like I hate when that happens. Now it was nice to see that it was different.
Yeah, I've been slamming this meat cleaver through bone. It's obviously going to be kind of frayed around the edges of the blade and look really ugly.
I snapped off the head of my shovel, so now I just have a stick.
Exactly.
Bad times.
It's a very, very useful stick,
Yeah.
I guess. Did you guys get into the crafting at all? Did you start to make your own weapons or modify them to do different, interesting things?
Here and there, I've only found a handful of blueprints, and most of them are all the same ones. Like, and a bunch of them are for weapons that I don't like. Like I found a bunch of blueprints that are like, you can make knives electric or knives that shoot fire, and I'm like, that's really cool, but I hate knives.
Yeah.
Like they're the worst weapon in the game.
I'm right there with you on that. I really dislike the knives.
And it's like, why isn't a machete considered a long knife?
Yeah.
Or one of those like fish hooks, is that not a long knife? Like if I could have a fire or electric machete, like that'd be sweet.
Yeah, I guess I reached the point where I was sort of like, well, are they gonna go all in comical Dead Rising with this, or are they gonna just kind of be like sort of realistic, sort of safe with it? And like the answer is they fell kind of somewhere in the middle. Like fire knives is ridiculous, but it's not like a baby carriage covered in chainsaws.
That's true.
Though
That's
I
true.
mean, every game.
It's one of the weirdest sentences I've ever said.
That would have made for an interesting addition to Dying Light.
But I think I would like to see in almost every game moving forward a baby carriage covered in chainsaws.
Absolutely.
Sure.
You hear that?
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about with the knives is I agree that they suck to use, but it is really fun to watch other people using them. Yeah. When I was playing with you on co-op, I think, I just saw you like going to town on a zombie, like straddling it and stabbing downward repeatedly.
It really
it's like,
does
that
look-
is hilarious.
It looks frantic, isn't it? You're just like, no, 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 no. And you're like, oh, this
We
is...
don't talk about this a lot, but games are actually therapy for John.
It's true.
Oh, okay.
We make sure he plays at least 8
I
hours
have
a
a
day.
lot of demons that I have to deal with.
All right, next I want to talk a bit about the day and night cycle. I think it's a real game changer in Dying Light, especially at first.
Yeah.
When you're kind of running scared, it doesn't even let you be out at night at first. It orders you to go to bed.
Go to bed.
Yeah, it's sunset. You got to get out of everything. Just go to bed. And when you do go out at night at first, like it's really tense because there are these things patrolling the map, the volatiles that can kill you like almost instantly if they see you. And I mean, if they do see you, it turns into this crazy sprint. But what did you guys think of it?
I mean, I feel like we were talking earlier on in the game. It's the whole experience, day, night, whatever. You're kind of forced to be like timid, more cat and mouse. I'm gonna run away. But I feel like the nighttime cycles, it gets less like this later in the game as you get more powerful. But I feel like for the first 2/3 of the game, it's just a straight up survival horror game.
Oh yeah,
I loved it. I thought it was such a cool change from the daytime, running around and smashing zombies. Like, it's fun, but then as soon as the sun goes down and the guys come with the rage, like, you've got to get back to a safe house now. You're like, oh God. And like you're nowhere near one, and then you're just stuck.
Yeah.
And you've got all these blips on your radar, and you're like, oh God, they're literally everywhere. And I thought it was a really cool transition, and made me start wanting to just have it be nighttime all the time.
That's actually really fascinating. I was going through a sort of similar spectrum where I was just like, I hate how scared I am right now.
But that's good.
But this is a really cool feeling. It's why I play survival horror games.
Right.
And it's like, I feel like this sort of like running and jumping rooftop Superman daytime stuff you do versus the stuff at night when you're weak and timid.
Yeah, exactly. It's like kryptonite.
It's a really good sort of split. Yeah, I like that. I wonder if they'll ever explore something like that as its own game model. But I do think it works like
just the nighttime segment.
Yeah, I mean, you actually planted a good idea right there.
Techland just doing straight up survival horror.
Yeah,
I think it could work. Yeah, I think it works especially well here because it's such a drastic shift. And like, it really is just kind of a reality check. It's like, you'll go out in the daytime and you're like, oh yeah, zombie, take that, I'm the shiz. And then everyone else is just like, no. And
like,
the sun
we're gonna
goes
go
down.
home now.
Right.
Yeah, you can
you're
stay
like,
out there.
Whatever, guys, I'll be fine. And then you just die immediately. It's like, and then you're down.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you think it was more or less terrifying to have those blips on the radar? Because I remember in early previews of the game, they talked about, you need to use your night sense to figure out where they are. And you can still use that. You have that pulse that detects items and things, and you send it out, and you see like, oh, that's a volatile because he's glowing. And I can see him jumping over things in the distance, and I know to stay away. But I can also see exactly where he is and where he's looking on the mini-map. So it kind of makes him easy to avoid, I thought.
Yeah. Like there's that old Alien style, right, which we saw in Isolation, which is sort of like the boop, and then you see it, and it like boop, and it gets a little closer each time. You're like, that's terrifying. But I think having like a little more static is it's slightly less so.
Yeah, so. I think that feeling of just abject terror, where you're like, oh God, I gotta get out of here, like fades both as you figure out, because like I didn't realize like the mini map was even a functional like, oh, there they are right over there kind of tool until probably my third night out in the world. Like the first time I was just so terrified and so focused on getting back to a safe house or just like hiding in a hole where no one would find me.
Do you think that's because you're terrible at video games?
It's probably because I'm terrible at video games.
It might be. I'm just throwing it out.
I think I had the same problem, so don't feel too bad.
Both of you might be terrible.
We might be.
Maybe all of us are just terrible at video games.
I'm the worst. So yeah, this is actually a support group. Thanks for coming.
But yeah, I mean, once you figure out the mechanics, it feels like later on, once you get more powerful and you really get a sense of like how the different types of volatiles move, I feel like it almost becomes more of a stealth game as opposed to survival horror. Like survival horror is cool, and like once they see you, it's definitely a horrifying aspect of it. But I feel like just the sneaking through and trying to avoid, like honestly, I felt like I was sneaking around like Shadow Moses.
And that is sort of like, and it's no one's ever been able to totally solve this, but that's one of like the kind of the fallbacks of every open world game is sort of, there's that beginning where everything's destroying you, there's the middle where it's sort of an even match all the time, and then there's the end where you're the king of the land and there's very few things left to do on the map, and this is definitely another game that kind of falls victim to that, although I don't know how to solve that because we're completionists and conquerors when we play games,
Yeah. Well, it's also kind of that reward, too. It's like, you get to the end of a game, and it's like, you know what? Yeah, you've been playing for 20, 25 hours.
Yeah.
Like, here, go ahead. Tear everything up. Like, destroy as much as you want. You've earned it.
Well, I will say, I've put in about 40 hours at this point, and the volatiles are still a serious threat at night. Like, they're pretty easy to avoid, but, like, if one of them starts chasing me, I can throw down a UV flare. The UV flashlight seems to do a little bit more. I'm sure it doesn't, but there's that illusion of like, oh, I have some power over this thing.
Yeah, but it won't kill them though. I mean, that's, that's the real thing. It's like they're still incredibly difficult to murder.
And they still take, like normal zombies on average for me, I have like this crazy sword that spits fire and electricity at the same time. And that can usually kill rank and file zombies in like 1 or 2 hits, but these guys still take like 3 or 4 really good direct hits in order to take them down. And they're very fast and they're very good about like skirting around the any UV flares I lay down. I'm curious, what did you think of the zombie AI in this? I was really impressed just day and night. Sounds like an oxymoron to say zombie AI.
That's always an interesting question. I didn't get as many of the moments I've had with other zombie games where they're just sort of like bumping into a door for a half an hour, like which like you kind of get it. I mean, you get that in games that don't have zombies also. That's just bad AI.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it, and I think early on like it's a threat, but you know kind of how to stay away from them. Like one of your first interactions with one of them is hitting it with a crowbar and it dies, and after that it's throwing firecrackers into a street and they walk over towards it. So you're like, this is not really imposing much of a threat to me. But after a little while, you start to realize their power in numbers.
Yeah, I mean, my thing was like I would always think that I had cleared out a small enough area that I could like get some work done, like either open up a chest or a fence or some boxes and stuff. And it would always surprise me when it would be like, ow, hey, oh crap, and then there's like 5 of them just standing there. Because I thought I had done a good enough job clearing them all out. But then the numbers just keep coming back against you. And then like the cool thing is like the differentiation between the zombie types I thought were really good too. I would always round a corner and see one of the firemen or like the convict dudes with a giant piece of rebar, and it would just be like, oh god, not another one.
Right, so the day and night cycle is really impressive, as is the zombie AI, surprisingly. Okay, so next up, I want to talk a bit about the pacing and the overall story. I kind of felt like the story was the weakest part. I feel like a lot of other people did too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, how far are you guys through it, and what do you think of it so far?
I'm probably about either halfway or 2/3 of the way through it, and while the story itself certainly, I mean, it's not blowing my skirt up in any huge revelatory way, I think the way that it's tied together in missions is well done. I like the story missions, just not so much the story itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really strong way of putting it.
Yeah.
Actually, is that like when you're being told to sort of do things or there's a objective, that leads it along better than when you're having any sort of like lengthy character interaction with somebody that you don't care about.
Because they also like they put all these moral decisions to you.
Yeah.
But they also don't give you any kind of choice. So it's like
it's not really a moral decision. It's more like your character has to do something immoral.
Right, but like your character is, they try and give him like personality and emotion and all that, but at the same time, like it still feels just like an empty vessel. So it's like I don't understand why you're having me feel these feelings when I just don't care.
Yeah, so it's so that he can complain about having to do the bad things as he does. It's like, I really don't like killing this guy, but
as he's stabbing him in the face.
I want you to know I feel really bad about this, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm shaking you down, old man, but like this guy's like, you got to shake down this old man.
What am I gonna do?
I think the voice acting is pretty well done. I think the main character especially is awesome. I'm not
He's the same guy that does Batman, right?
Yeah, Roger Craig Smith.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel that like some of the side characters are where things start to get a little dicey.
See, I would say that I've found that the side characters are some of the more interesting story parts of the game itself.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, because there's like all these different side missions and stuff. Like I remember the first one that I did was like one dude in the main building was like, "Hey man, like I want to get my family out of the city. Like I need a gun to do it. Can you help me out?" And I'm like, "Sure, man, I'll find you a pistol, no problem." And I go and I give him the gun and he gives me the reward and I leave. And then all of a sudden they're just like, "Hey, can anyone come back to the place? This guy just shot like 4 people and kidnapped his son."
Yeah.
I was like, what? No. Why would
Okay,
you
so
do
yeah,
that?
I'll give you that. That's actually that's a good trick.
Right?
Yeah, I think the side missions.
Right? I felt so bad.
The side missions are really well constructed, and at their best, like that one, they're part of a narrative that kind of spans the course of the game. Like you will see that guy again.
And better.
Yeah, there are a bunch
some
that
sweet vengeance.
Yeah, they start out as like just kind of generic fetch quests, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
need this part to make this bomb.
Right.
And then they kind of spiral into much bigger narratives.
Yeah.
And then there are some, especially in the second half of the game, that get really, really creepy, where it's like, yeah, this guy is missing, can you go find him? And it turns into like a murder mystery sort of thing where you're like finding all these clues. It's like, okay, where did he go next? This is getting really eerie, and everything's going sepia toned for some reason.
I'm totally okay with that. I
Yeah.
love the weird little side tangents.
Yeah, and I think that's great. That's where the storytelling is at its brightest.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we saw with Unity last fall. Like, I thought the main story of that was boring as hell, but all of the side missions, like the murder mysteries and like the secondary puzzles and stuff, I thought those were like some of the best parts of the game. And I think Dying Light does the exact same thing, and it does it really, really well.
What do you guys think about, as long as we're talking about pacing, the progression of your character over the game? I mean, do you feel like you were able to do new things on a semi-regular basis? Like, were you getting rewards often enough?
Yeah, I feel like my personal style of play, I feel like I was leveling up my power skills more than anything. Like, I kind of wish that I'd been able to get a new skill point and then just spend it on whichever one of the three I wanted, as opposed to saying, like, you have to run and jump this much in order to be able to unlock a new jump ability.
Right.
I mean, I thought it was a cool mechanic, and it forced me to do more stuff like that, which I thought was an interesting choice. But at the same time, like, I feel even though I was getting a reward or an unlock of some kind, like every 20 to 25 minutes of play, which is good, I feel like it wasn't. It prohibited me from being really excited about it, because it was always like, all right, well, I got that, I guess, but I really wanted that one. You know?
Yeah, I think that like that's sort of like that struggle with the realism and video game world,
Yeah.
right? Where they're just always at odds with each other. I felt the same way. Like it's cool when stuff like that happens, but unless I was like actively trying to make it happen, it was just sort of like, oh, thanks.
Okay.
It's kind of like when you're playing a game and an achievement unlock pops up and you're like, oh, I wasn't even trying to do that.
Yeah.
But thank you, I'll take it.
Yeah, glad it's there.
Yeah.
I suppose. What did you guys think of going back to the main story, some of the twists early on? Like, did you find them satisfying? Because that's really all you're going to get. I think it's interesting because most of the twists happen early on in the story, and then kind of the second half is like everything's kind of should be taken at face value. Like, this guy's not going to betray you. This guy's not going to turn out to be the good guy. It's going to be exactly like you think it is.
Yeah. I'm not really sure. I mean, at first it was like, when you first said that, I was like, wait, twists? And then I was like, oh, you just mean, the same tropes that we've seen in every movie, TV, and video game for the last X
like,
years.
I'm not supposed to be doing this moment.
Yeah, but you're making me do this. Why am I burning this medicine?
There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
No, I felt the same way. And it's weird for such a long game to really, if the best kind of story beats aren't that great and they happen that early, that kind of says something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that just kind of like, I like the characters, but the narrative structure is just not really there. It's like you've got the first act set up, which is the first quarter of the game, and then what's supposed to be like the huge, horrible thing that makes everyone realize we got to get our stuff together, guys, is like the second quarter of the game. But then you've got the last half or 2/3 of the game almost, where you're just like, all right, well, status quo, we're just kind of hanging out, I guess. The end. Bye. And that's it. Like, it's just like, 10, 15 hours into the game, you're like, curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you're just like, well, let's go home. Okay.
All right,
cool.
sure. Yay. But, overall, I still thought the story is okay. It's serviceable. It's kind of workmanlike. It's not fantastic, but it does a good job of stringing the action along.
Yeah.
So, that's what we thought of Dying Light. For more on Dying Light, be sure to keep it here at IGN.